In the quiet, snow-covered landscapes of Sweden, far away from the roaring superpowers of the world, a secret was being shaped. Engineers in hidden hangars worked in silence, guarded by layers of secrecy, on a project that would one day terrify the world's most powerful pilots. That project was Gripen E, a fighter jet that would shatter every expectation and every rule of air combat. Gripen was never meant to be a monster of size or cost. It was meant to be invisible, unpredictable, and merciless. The Swedish Air Force had no illusions. They could not match America's vast fleets, nor Russia's heavy arsenals, nor China's growing armadas. But Sweden had something else. Innovation born of survival. They needed a fighter that could strike fear, not by numbers, but by mystery. A jet that could appear like a ghost, strike with precision, and vanish before its prey even realized what had happened. The Gripen E was the evolution of that vision. Outwardly small, light, and elegant, it looked almost harmless compared to the hulking F-35s, Typhoons, or Sukhois. But behind its graceful lines hid a machine that rewrote the meaning of modern warfare. Its avionics could confuse radars, its sensors could see farther than pilots dared imagine, and its electronic warfare systems, the legendary Arexus, could silence an enemy jet as if ripping its eyes and ears out mid-air. The first stories that spread among pilots were whispers. In NATO exercises, American and European pilots expected to dominate the Swedes. Instead, something unnerving happened. Screens went dark, radars failed, communications collapsed, and then, like a shadow, the Gripen appeared on their flank, weapons locked, before disappearing again into the clouds. Many laughed it off as training tricks, but deep inside, the fear took root. One pilot compared the feeling to being hunted by something that wasn't supposed to exist. Gripen E was not only fast and agile, it was patient. Unlike jets that needed massive runways, it could launch from highways, hide in forests, and return to battle within minutes. An enemy force could wipe out an entire airbase, only to find Gripens re-emerging from unexpected corners, striking again and again. It was not just a fighter. It was an illusionist. And the strangest part was its cost. For the price of one advanced stealth jet, a nation could buy multiple Gripens. For generals used to trillion-dollar fleets, this was terrifying. If a small neutral country like Sweden could build such a machine, what would happen if others followed? Suddenly, the balance of air power no longer seemed so certain, and that uncertainty became a weapon. By the late 2010s, the Gripen E had begun to spread its legend. Analysts in Washington, London, and Moscow received reports that their most trusted aircraft had been humiliated in exercises. Some dismissed the stories, others quietly admitted the truth. The Gripen was not just another fighter. It was a hunter disguised as prey. In secret war games, pilots faced nightmares they could not explain. A radar would show multiple targets, none real. A missile warning would scream in the cockpit, but no missile existed. Communications with wingmen would vanish in static, leaving pilots alone in the sky. And then, before they could breathe, the Gripen would appear, close, silent, locked on target. There was no escape. It felt alive, one NATO pilot confessed. It felt like it knew my moves before I made them. This was the terror of Gripen E. It did not just fight with weapons, it fought with the mind. It made pilots doubt their machines, their tactics, even themselves, and that doubt in combat is deadlier than any missile. But what made the Gripen's story truly mysterious was Sweden's silence. The world saw only glimpses, only the fragments Sweden allowed. No one knew how many Gripens existed, how advanced their software had become, or what hidden upgrades lay waiting. Every unanswered question made the legend grow darker. Was it already capable of defeating stealth aircraft? Could it command swarms of drones? Could it turn an entire battlefield blind in seconds? No one outside Sweden truly knew, and that was the most frightening part. Gripen E had become something larger than a jet. It was a shadow in the sky, a symbol of the unknown, a machine that turned hunters into hunted. And for every enemy pilot who faced it, the nightmare began the same way. A flicker on the radar, a whisper of static, and the sinking realization that the Gripen was already there. Watching, waiting, choosing the moment to strike. As the years passed, the Gripen E's reputation only grew darker. It was no longer just a Swedish secret. It was becoming a riddle that unsettled even the most powerful militaries in the world. What terrified enemy pilots most was not what they saw, but what they could not see. Every encounter with the Gripen felt like a dance with an invisible predator. The source of this terror lay in its brain. The Arexus electronic warfare suite, unlike traditional jammers that simply blocked signals. Arexus was an artist of deception. It could create false targets that confused radars, making pilots believe they were surrounded by multiple enemies. It could blind missile systems, forcing them to chase ghosts. It could silence communication so completely that a pilot felt trapped in a coffin of static, isolated from his squadron. And worst of all, it could do all of this simultaneously, adapting in real time, as if it were alive. During secret NATO war games, Gripen E showed its full cruelty. Squadrons of advanced jets, F-35s, Typhoons, Rafales, entered the simulation confident in their superiority. But one by one, their screens flickered, their radars went blind, and their systems refused to respond. By the time they realized what was happening, the Gripen had already locked them. Pilots later confessed that the experience was not just humiliating, it was terrifying. "I felt powerless," one said. "I wasn't fighting another jet. I was fighting the unknown." What made the Gripen even more dangerous was its unpredictability. In one mission, it acted as a fighter, striking with deadly precision. In another, it became a commander, linking drones and satellites into a web of information. In another, it became a phantom jammer, disappearing from enemy radars entirely. No two encounters were the same, and that made planning against it nearly impossible. How can you fight an enemy you cannot predict? The Swedish doctrine behind Gripen only deepened the mystery. Unlike great powers that showed off their jets with aggressive propaganda, Sweden remained silent. They revealed only fragments, never the full truth. Military experts debated endlessly. Was the Gripen truly capable of defeating stealth aircraft? Could it hijack enemy missiles mid-flight? Could it already control drone swarms without detection? No one knew, and every rumor became another layer of fear. By the early 2020s, the Gripen had gained a new nickname among pilots: the Phantom Jet. It did not overwhelm its enemies with sheer force. It toyed with them. It slipped into the battlefield like a shadow, broke their confidence, and vanished before they could recover. The fear was not of destruction, but of helplessness. The sense that no matter what a pilot did, the Gripen was already 3 steps ahead. Generals began to notice a troubling pattern. Enemy pilots who trained against Gripens came back shaken. They hesitated in future exercises. Some even admitted to feelings of dread whenever they saw their radar screens flicker. Fear had become a weapon, and Gripen wielded it mercilessly. Wars are not only fought with missiles and bombs, but with morale, and Gripen E was eroding the morale of some of the world's best-trained pilots. But perhaps the most unsettling feature of Gripen E was its independence. While other jets needed sprawling bases, long runways, and constant support, Gripen thrived in secrecy. It could take off from a frozen highway, hide in dense forests, and refuel within minutes. Entire squadrons could vanish into Sweden's wilderness, only to reappear hours later, fully armed and ready. For any enemy planning a strike, this was a nightmare. How do you destroy an air force that can disappear into the earth itself? The whispers only grew louder. Some claimed the Gripen had secretly tested systems that allowed it to paralyze entire radar networks. Others believed it had hidden stealth coatings never revealed to the public. And then there were darker rumors still, that Gripen pilots trained not only in tactics, but in psychological warfare, designed to break their enemies mentally before firing a single shot. No one could confirm these stories, but they spread like wildfire through briefing rooms and air bases. By now, Gripen E was no longer just a fighter jet. It was a legend, a shadow that lived in the minds of its enemies. A pilot entering a battlefield where Gripen might be present was already at a disadvantage, not because of what the Gripen did, but because of what the pilot feared it could do. And in the deadly silence of aerial combat, that fear was often enough to decide the outcome. For Sweden, this was victory without war. For its enemies, it was the beginning of a nightmare. And as Gripen continued to evolve, one question haunted every strategist, every commander, every pilot who heard its name. If this is what it can do now, what will it become in the future? The final stage of Gripen E's legend was not written in open skies, but in the hidden calculations of strategy rooms across the world. Generals and analysts pored over every fragment of intelligence, every rumor, every unexplained incident involving the Swedish jet. The more they studied, the more they realized a disturbing truth. Gripen E was not merely a machine of war. It was a psychological weapon, designed to bend the minds of its enemies before its missiles ever left the rails. One of Gripen's greatest terrors was its cost-effectiveness. For the price of one American stealth jet, an air force could field several Gripens, each with capabilities that rivaled, or even surpassed, the most advanced fighters in certain scenarios. This imbalance forced strategists to confront an unsettling idea. A small nation with limited resources could wield power equal to or greater than a superpower. It was a shift in the balance of military power that no one wanted to admit, yet no one could ignore. For enemy pilots, facing a Gripen E was like entering a nightmare from which there was no awakening. They were trained to fight visible enemies, aircraft they could see, track, and engage. But Gripen fought like a shadow. It blinded radars, bent signals, and tricked systems into seeing what was not there. Every second in the sky against it felt like walking in darkness, with an unseen predator circling ever closer. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the Gripen would strike with surgical precision. But Gripen's terror did not end with its electronic warfare. It was also a master of survival. Where other jets needed sprawling bases and vulnerable infrastructure, Gripen thrived in secrecy. Highways became its runways, remote forests became its hangars. Mechanics could rearm it in minutes with minimal equipment, sending it back into combat faster than most enemies could reload. This gave Sweden an advantage no great power had expected. An air force that could survive a first strike and continue fighting long after others had been destroyed. By the mid-2020s, darker stories began to circulate. Some claimed Gripen E had secretly downed stealth aircraft in classified exercises. Others whispered of its ability to command drone swarms, turning the battlefield into a hive of invisible predators. There were even rumors, impossible to prove, yet impossible to dismiss, that Gripen systems could infiltrate enemy communications, sowing false commands and chaos before a battle even began. Whether truth or myth, these tales spread fear like wildfire, reinforcing the Gripen's legend as a ghost of the skies. The most chilling part of Gripen E's design was its adaptability. Unlike other jets locked into rigid systems, Gripen's software could evolve. It could be reprogrammed mid-flight, transforming from a fighter to a jammer to a command hub in moments. No enemy could predict what role it would play. And unpredictability in war is more deadly than raw firepower. Pilots facing a Gripen did not know if they were confronting a hunter, a deceiver, or a commander, orchestrating an invisible web of drones and allies. That uncertainty was enough to paralyze even the bravest. Strategists began to understand that Gripen's true weapon was fear itself. Fear corrodes discipline. Fear creates hesitation. Fear breaks trust between pilots and their machines. When a radar flickered, when a warning sounded, when a screen went blank, pilots no longer asked, "Is this a malfunction?" Instead, they asked, "Is this the Gripen?" That single thought, that seed of doubt, was enough to tip the balance of a battle. Even in peace, Gripen E cast its shadow. Nations considering it for their air forces spoke in hushed tones of the secrets they might be buying. Rivals debated endlessly how to counter it, yet no clear answers emerged. Every upgrade Sweden announced raised new questions. What were they not revealing? What hidden capabilities lay locked inside the jet, waiting for the day of war? Silence, secrecy, and shadows, these became the Gripen's most effective allies. For enemy pilots, the nightmare remains eternal. A sudden flicker on the radar, a burst of static in the headset, a moment of silence where systems fail without reason. And in that silence, a chilling realization. The Gripen is already there, unseen, unstoppable, choosing the moment to strike. Once it does, there is no escape. The hunter has become the hunted, and the legend of Gripen E lives on, not just in Sweden's forests and runways, but in the nightmares of every pilot who dares to face the sky.